Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz, and I'm reflecting on my time here during the Masters in Mobile Gaming at Full Sail. When I came into Full Sail in general, I did my background, I did my research, and one of the things that helped push me through both my undergraduates and my master's degree, particularly, was a comment that I had read on the message boards when I was doing research on Full Sail. And one of the alumnus had popped in to one of the debates and said, "You get out of it what you put into it." So, a little bit of background on me is about during the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, I had started a company called Lookout Industries that made games for bulletin board systems. So, uh, wrongfully, I started my academic education career at Full Sail, thinking that I had a pretty strong handle on how to make a game, how to be successful in the industry. And one of the things that I had learned going through my undergraduates that what I really was a poster child of how not to make a game. All of the whatever you do, don't do these things was a checklist. I was checking all the things not to do. And what that resulted in, despite the fact that anyone looking back at the years of Lookout Industries would easily say that it was successful, but I couldn't tell you why, right? I couldn't repeat that success. I couldn't engineer or design the success. So there was a certain amount of luck and unpredictability involved in it. So I entered the undergraduates program, eyes wide open, opportunity, with that tagline, you get out of it what you put into it. So I had made the conscious decision to put everything I have into it and sort of learn how to do game design. I ended up stepping away from Lookout Industries only because the internet was a very disruptive addition to the business world, especially in the gaming world, and it pushed gaming onto the internet. I followed, went to the internet, and we made games there for a while before the big guys got involved. And I just didn't have the budget or resources to compete with large budget games. Just wasn't in the market. So I had shifted gears and moved back into the business. Roll ahead 2 decades, and now the mobile market, everyone having a cell phone in their pocket, has reinvigorated the opportunity for an indie developer to have an idea, have a concept, and enter the market with a somewhat even kilter to be able to exist. The topography of the mobile gaming market surface area is large enough that it can support numerous indie game developers. The pricing model had also matured from my day of making games. It was largely shareware, where basically you put the game out there for free and hoped that someone liked it enough that they were willing to donate money. So, with the upgrades, the evolution of the industry, the changes in the pricing model, and the delivery system around mobile, it made sense for me to try to get back into it. And I entertained the opportunity and the possibility that quite a bit has changed potentially over the last 3 decades. Maybe I can learn something. So, going through my undergraduate's degree, the concept was around designing games. How do I design mobile games? How do I design games? What is has the gaming industry matured enough that there's some real business best practices around it? And there are. There's tons of them. There's a lot of knowledge, and I exited my undergraduates as salutatorian, and so I felt like I had really gotten out of it what I put into it. So my next move was to, okay, I have a stronger understanding of how to design a game and how to implement that game in a way that'll be fun and engaging for the players. So now I need to really understand mobile gaming, right? Because that's the market I was chasing. And I went into this master's program, other than what any average person would know about their phone and having played games on it. That's about all I knew. So at the very beginning, there was a definite tier, right? There was a huge step, a hurdle to get over, where I had to basically raise the level of demand on myself, both for writing, research, asking questions, the all the rigor and academic requirements around a master's program, and some of the really powerful courses that I took were right up front around mastery level writing, academic research, and around tearing apart algorithms and developing O notation and learning how to take code and turn it into polynomial time. That really became critical for me as I moved forward in the master's program, particularly with the capstone project Battlecry, which you'll see across my entire master's journal, required that basic fundamentals of being able to write appropriately, convey ideas, be able to do all of the rigor required, because it was all going to be on me. I had to be the designer, the UX designer, the project manager, the coder. I filled in all of those roles from end to end, which is not necessarily typical in the industry. But if you're going to go into, and which was my plan, to become an independent game developer in the mobile industry, I really need to have enough under my belt of every one of those roles to be able to manage it, know whether it's being done properly, and act as a mentor if I outsource that to a contractor. So those first few courses were really critical for setting the foundation, the baseline for me on being able to properly get through the master's program. I don't think I would have made it had I not gone through those courses. The next set of courses really kind of were refreshers around my game design. So there was a lot brought up from my undergraduates, learning frameworks in the mobile industry. So that was very interesting to me, such as the Unreal Engine, Unity, and a variety of the other gaming engines out there. There's a lot more to choose from than I originally thought were there. And that gave me a much larger landscape to look at what was the game I wanted to make, rather than trying to restrict it to within a single framework. The ability to kind of dig into those frameworks, understand what their limitations were and what they were good at, right? So each one of the frameworks had pros and cons to it. And knowing a little bit about all of those really helped significantly. And then we got into the design portion of the game where we're prototyping, we're building paper prototypes and really going through the design process. This is an area that historically I had done a very different way, and following what I learned here at Full Sail made the development pieces almost apodactic. Just to give you a comparison, back in the Locatha Industries days, me and the group would sit around, we'd come up with an idea, we'd jot down some notes, maybe spend an hour, and then from there, I'd immediately start coding and the rework and the regrind of some of the polish. I mean, I was shooting for high gloss, like out of the gate, right? The benefit of that model, of which there's this only one, is the fact that you get to see something fairly quickly, but as you're revising your idea, the cost of the iteration was ridiculous. The time it took to get things done, ridiculous. The amount of wasted work, ridiculous. As I've gone to adopt the best practices in the industry of taking the time, design it out, paper prototype it, prototype the screens, do an interactive prototype, literally code out some prototypes of mechanics that we're uncertain about, and just put a little bit of work, maybe 2 or 3 days behind test driving that concept and putting it in front of people. All of that, while it seems like a lot of work and I don't really have a game to show, sets such a solid foundation for the development style. And right up to the concept of do a full build. As I get into the development of the game, just do a whiteout. Don't worry about the graphics. Just make sure that there's a box where graphics should be, and there's enough visual information that you can properly test the mechanics in the game you're trying to get through. And then when it comes time to drop in the graphics, they just drop in, right? You can have some really, and they're very plug and playable. If something doesn't work, you can change it. That actually happened during the development of Battlecry. As I was going through it, I had originally a vision of all these very realistic stones and woods in there, and it just made the interface too harsh. It was too sharp and cut, and so I dialed it back to something a little more cartoony, and that just worked. That just really fell in. But the amount of work I had to do to support that change was almost nothing. Right? It was just the work around finding the graphics. So it was a really powerful way to manage the agility of the software development process. So as we get into the storyboarding and the usability engineering and the agile software process, which is sort of the next series of classes on this coursework, you really get to deep dive into understanding, not just doing it, right? being in business for 30 years, we hand out tasks to people and say, do this, but we don't do a very good job at going, here's why you're doing it, and here's the benefit of what you're going to get while you're doing this, right? And that's really the difference between going through this coursework is you don't just do it, right? You know the why of it. And that helps you expand it and grow it even further. So that has fundamentally changed the way I approach software in its entirety. And the way that I look at the user interface has changed dramatically. I'm a business apps developer by trade. So I tend to look at everything functionally, not from a usability standpoint. And while functional, the screen does what it's supposed to do, it's not very user friendly, right? We've used those terms before. So being able to understand Gestalt principles and understand that there's madness to the way things are grouped and aligned and put onto a screen and where the user's focus is, that was new to me. So those are areas that I'm still mastering and still perfecting and probably will so for years to come. And then we got into the development side and following that agile process and being able to manage the milestones and the backlog and the tasks and seeing it work in all facets and running into problems and how do I solve them and digging into architecture and looking for ways that are force multipliers for me in that architecture. Because again, while this isn't typical of production in the world, I was a one-man show. So I was making decisions on how can I speed up my development by making the data layer a little more efficient and the interface layer at Azure more efficient and the front end side of the mobile piece. How can I streamline those connection points and keep them loose coupled, but I wanted to be able to just do edge development. I wanted to work on the data, work on the UI, and let everything pass through. So I had to come up with an architecture that supported that, which was a force multiplier for me to be able to meet what I would consider by anyone's definition a very aggressive deadline. I went beyond just a basic prototype and wanted a fully working game that you could play end to end. Is it perfect? No, there's still some things that we want to do before we take it into production, but it was good enough to put in front of investors and get investors to throw a lot of money behind the game and take it to market. So that's proof in the pudding to me that something I've designed, taken time to do, used all of these tools learned here at Full Sail to be able to take this and put it in front of someone and say, would you put money behind this? Do you believe what I believe and can get this to market? And it worked out. And learning ways to quantify and qualify mobile testing was another critical one. Now that I've got this thing built, how can I get actionable results from the users to test it, see what works, doesn't work, and then there are procedures and processes that I learned on how to decide what needs to be changed and what can be mitigated in, not necessarily change the code, but maybe a way that we're training the user to get it done. So at the end of it, from the beginning to the end, it's a walk. It was a lot of commitment for me, not only just for me, but my family and everyone around me. There was just tons of work. And again, when I started this journey and researched Full Sail and the message boards, and I regret not writing down that user's name or recording that message board against all of the negative posts, the one alumnus that says, look, guys, you get out of this what you put into it. I come to the end of this journey as masters going into the world and taking this product and pushing it into production. And I can say for sure, you get out of it what you put into it. The tools are there, the knowledge is there, the help is there if you need it. But you're only going to get out of this experience what you put into it. And for me, it has been an amazing experience. I am really looking forward to taking that step into the world into production and finding out where this is going to go.